We are talking Pegasus World Cup contenders with Eddie Olczyk at First Bet. I'm Jeremy Plunk. We're up to Il Miracolo, a horse who's familiar with fans of Gulfstream Park. Last year was in the Florida Derby Series. Now back at age 4, he's taking a shot at the big one, Edzo.
Yeah, he really is. And, O'Connor, who we expect to be in the Pegasus, Il Miracolo finished second to O'Connor 2 races ago at Keeneland.
Mm-hmm.
He wants fast pace. I think he'll get it. I'm not sure if he's in this same area code of some of these other horses. I kind of feel maybe he's a cut below. Mm-hmm. But I will say, if you go back and watch his last race in the Clark, watch the last half mile and look at I think the biggest thing in horse racing is everybody applauds and stands up and tips hats and hockey helmets, I guess I'll say, to rides and to trainers and everything. But when things don't go well, very rarely you question a ride. And look, who am I to question Tyler Gaffleon? But if you want to go back and watch the ride that he got in the Clark, go back and form your own opinion. He was sitting right in behind Trademark, who I ended up having that day at a big number. But I thought Il Miracolo was going to win the race if he just stays on the rail. As they turn for home, Tyler goes from the rail to the 6 path, and then he swings back down to the 2.5 or 3 path and ends up running for third. So look at
right.
I didn't like the ride at all. I think it cost them a better placing. So if you think about a trip or you think about a horse that maybe can sit the trip if there's a fast pace, this might be your horse. So he's definitely going to be a use for me on all of my tickets. But go back, watch the race, form your own opinion. All you got to do is watch the last half a mile, and you sit there and you'll see what I saw. Now, you maybe think the other way, but it might be a little food for thought if you want to use this horse on some of your tickets come Pegasus.
After 6 straight road games, it's back on the home track for Il Miracolo, who's the son of Gunrunner, a winner of the Pegasus World Cup in his heyday. So for more information, be sure to check out the first wager guide for the Pegasus World Cup. The 8th running of the Pegasus World Cup will be Saturday, January 27th at Gulfstream Park. And to help us dissect the contenders, it's Eddie Olczyk. I'm Jeremy Plunk with First Bet. Edzo, first up out of the box, we're going to talk about First Mission.
Well, Jeremy, great to be with you, and obviously an exciting time for everybody at Gulfstream and the running of the Pegasus. The interesting thing with First Mission is he ran his fastest career race in the Clark, getting beat a nose to Trademark. And I think anytime you see a horse, especially a Brad Cox horse, in my opinion, ascend and seem to improve race after race, and really taking a huge step up here really it's not a scare for me. But I think the one thing that I think is very important in this race, depending on how the post positions draw and what the track condition happens to be, is that I think that First Mission, coming off the best race of his career, looks to be able to rate, I think, which is going to be very important, because it seems to me, and I don't know what you think, but it seems to me that there's going to be a lot of speed and a lot of horses. I don't want to say have one way of going, but if they have any thoughts of the Pegasus, they got to be very close to the lead. So I think that will lend itself to a quick pace. So I think First Mission has the ability to be able to rate, and he also has, even though he's a very young horse, even though 4 years old as far as racing, only 5 times in his career. 2 races back, he had some adversity in that race, in an allowance race at Keeneland back in October. So I think when you put it all in the blender, this is a horse, if you like a horse that's maybe sitting on a bigger race, I think First Mission might be that horse, because I think he can be tactical. He's had some adversity. He's relatively fresh. And I think with a combination of Brad Cox and whoever ends up on this horse, could be a very dangerous horse in a Pegasus.
Cox had the beaten favorite last year with Cyberknife in the Pegasus, but he's won it before in the past with horses like Knicks Go. Be sure to check out the Pegasus World Cup Wager Guide, available beginning on the 23rd. The Pegasus World Cup comes up on January 27th at Gulfstream Park. The $3 million main event has a full cast of contenders, including some international intrigue this year. Eddie Olczyk, Jeremy Plunk from First Bet. As we go to the Chilean bred and South American export, O'Connor, he settled in nicely in the U.S., Edzo.
Yeah, the last 2, he's 2 for 2, ran a huge race at Gulfstream and the Harlan Holiday, and He looked beat at the top of the lane, Jeremy. I don't want to say he looked like he was spinning his wheels, but he just looked like he was in deep water. But give Tyler credit. He kept pedaling, and O'Connor gave more. And this horse has shown a lot of gusto. I mean, when you think about the win at Keeneland, and I mean, he's as far as the wagering aspect of it, I mean, he's been almost 4-1. He's been almost 5.5-1 in the last 2 races. So it's a horse that I think there were some big expectations, kind of slow to come around here, and now winning back-to-back races. So I think he's going to get the setup, Jeremy. We continue to talk about it, and look, I'd be shocked if they aren't going really quick in the Pegasus, regardless of post positions and what have you. And I think that's the type of race that O'Connor wants. Now, the one thing that has been noticeable, he's been much closer to the front end in the last couple of races than he had been prior, and give Tyler credit for that, right? And I think that's something that being tactical in these type of races is so important. So is O'Connor going to be used on my tickets? Absolutely, because he is at his home track. And he's on a two race winning streak. So all positives for me when it comes to betting O'Connor and using. Will I pick him on top? Only time will tell.
When you look at horses like this that are in good form, when they get the pace set up as well in their favor, a lot of times they don't want to give away such an advantage. So it should set up nicely for O'Connor, the 7-year-old looking for his North American defining victory in an international career. That's a look at O'Connor, and we'll have more in the first Pegasus World Cup Wager Guide. Be sure to check that out beginning on the 23rd. Our look at the Pegasus World Cup contenders continues with Senor Buscador as we march towards the January 27th $3 million Pegasus World Cup. Alongside Eddie Olczyk, I'm Jeremy Plunk. Edzo, Senor Buscador is in this race because he's a good middle distance runner. 1.1 miles for the Pegasus. It's not the classic. It's not the sprint. It's in that middle trip, and that seems to be where he does his best running.
Yeah, it does. And I think for trainer Todd Fincher, a little bit of moisture in the racetrack would certainly get my attention. And I think that this horse moves up quite a bit on an off track. I mean, look at what he did cutting back in the Cigar Mile, running second to Hoist the Gold. So I think the faster they go, the better opportunity that they'd be able to make that big move, and just hope that the race collapses. But I think that this horse would move up on my tickets if it is an off track. So I think you have to be. I think that's the one thing as a handicapper and a gambler, Jeremy, as we both are, is that you got to be loose and quick on your feet, because if a track comes up a certain way, a horse moves up on it, or you think the horse moves up on it, well, then you know what, you got to use that horse in some higher levels. But you're going to need the pace to stop. He's going to need a meltdown. But I do have a question mark. On a fast track, I think he's just going to have too much work to do, and it is very difficult at Gulfstream Park to be. If I'm just looking at it and pace wise, I mean, he might be like he was in the Breeders' Cup Classic, where at one point he's 15 lengths out of it, and really the only horse that really closed and made a lot of movement was the horse that I liked in that race, and unfortunately wasn't able to be finished first or second, and that was Proxy, who came flying in the middle of the track. So rain, fast pace, Senor Buscador will certainly be on my tickets, but if it's a fast track, I think he's got a lot of work to do.
He's been well-traveled, based in New Mexico, but he's never there. He's been at Gulfstream Park all winter and training towards this one. We'll see if he's got another road victory in him. He won at Del Mar last summer. Senor Buscador, one of the late runners to consider in this year's Pegasus World Cup. Our look at the contenders for the Pegasus World Cup continues with Skippy Longstocking. Eddie Olczyk, Jeremy Plunk from First Bet. Be sure to play the Pegasus World Cup coming up on January 27th at Gulfstream Park, the $3 million main event with Express Bet and First Bet. And so Skippy Longstocking is a horse we're familiar with. Fans of this race are familiar with him as well. 7th in this race a year ago. You followed his career for a long time, going back to that Triple Crown trail.
Yeah, been around a long time. Getting old like us, Jeremy. Getting old. Loves Gulfstream. Moves up, I think, significantly on and off track. Not just because he's a perfect 2 for 2, but I think he does have on the off track. I should finish, but I think he does have the ability to sit and stalk. And I think with all this quick pace in this race that we're anticipating, if it does come off track or has some moisture in there, I think he's got to be used. Look, I've always tried to beat this horse. I've been lucky a couple of times. There's been some other times where he's caught me, and it's cost me some bucks. But his last race in the Breeders' Cup Mile, it wasn't exactly a smooth trip. He was wide, and I think he continued to battle. And I think this is a horse that I think he's going to get a good price. I think it's going to be one of these horses that I think you're probably going to be looking at somewhere in that 10 to 15 to 1 range, Jeremy. And, you know, why can't he hit the board? So if it isn't off track, he's going to be a use for me. And I love that he's tactical. Probably like him more tactical on an off track than I do if it's fast, because I like some other horses that I think can accelerate a little bit better than he can. But interesting horse. You love the veterans, and he's been around a long time. And we'll see how he runs again at Gulfstream, because he seems to run his best at Gulfstream Park.
Trained by Safi Joseph, who also has O'Connor in here. You're probably going to get the much better price on Skippy Longstocking compared to those two Joseph trainees. You mentioned the off track. He's by Exaggerator, one of the great mutters of all time that we recall winning the Preakness. So there's no doubt that they would like an off track with Skippy Longstocking if they can get it. We're looking for sunshine, though, in the Pegasus World Cup. For more on the big race, be sure to check out our wager guide available on the 23rd. Be sure to bet the race with First Bet and Express Bet. We are looking at the 8th running of the Pegasus World Cup coming up on Saturday, January 27th at Gulfstream Park. He's Eddie Olczyk. I'm Jeremy Plonk from First Bet. And Edzo, let's talk about the big name in this field. It's last year's Preakness winner, National Treasure. We don't have Mage, the Derby winner. We don't have Arcangelo, the Belmont winner, back at 4, but we do have last year's Preakness champ.
Yeah, and you know, anytime that you see a horse trained by Bob Baffert, certainly take notice. And this horse, I think, is got one way to go, and that seems to be the theme of the Pegasus. And that's okay for me, because I like trying to find horses that maybe can sit the trip or maybe be a little bit tactical. He's only got one win going 2 turns, and I mean that's a little bit of a concern, you know, for me. And you know, that is the Preakness that you had mentioned, Jeremy, but. I think he's got to be a horse that's got to be on the lead, and you know, I think he probably will be, you know, very close to the lead or on the lead, but I think there's going to be so much pressure here, and that's the biggest question mark that I have for National Treasure. And when you see horses that only can be on the lead, and you know there's going to be a lot of pace in there, then I think then you just kind of say, hey, you know what, I'm going to just go ahead and throw out all the speed horses and look for a closer. So for me, National Treasure, will I be using him? Probably not, because he's probably going to be a short price, and I would probably be willing to wager is that he will probably, you know, ended up getting some pace, and then he'll have to answer the question as they turn for home. I'd be willing to say that if he's anything less than 3 to 1, I'd be certainly, you know, looking at him and saying, okay, you know what, I could maybe use him for 3rd if I think he's going to hang around, if I'm going to play tries. But he'd be one that I would probably say, you know what, if he beats me, he beats me. I tip my hockey helmet to Bob Baffert again and look for another race.
That's a look at National Treasure, the Preakness winner, trying to hit the jackpot again in the Pegasus World Cup. The 8th running of the Pegasus World Cup will be Saturday, January 27th at Gulfstream Park. And to help us dissect the contenders, it's Eddie Olczyk. I'm Jeremy Plonk with First Bet. Edzo, first up out of the box, we're going to talk about First Mission.
Well, Jeremy, great to be with you, and obviously an exciting time for everybody at Gulfstream and the running of the Pegasus. You know, the interesting thing with First Mission is he ran his fastest career race in the Clark, getting beat a nose to Trademark. And I think anytime you see a horse, especially a Brad Cox horse, in my opinion, ascend and seem to improve race after race, and really taking a huge step up here really it's not a scare for me. But I think the one thing that I think is very important in this race, depending on how the post positions draw and you know what the track condition happens to be, is that I think that First Mission, coming off the best race of his career, looks to be able to rate, I think, which is going to be very important, because it seems to me, and I don't know what you think, but it seems to me that there's going to be a lot of speed and a lot of horses. I don't want to say have one way of going, but if they have any thoughts the Pegasus, they got to be very close to the lead. So I think that will lend itself to a quick pace. So I think First Mission has the ability to be able to rate, and he also has, even though he's a very young horse, even though 4 years old as far as racing, only 5 times in his career.
Mm-hmm.
Two races back, he had some adversity in that race, in an allowance race at Keeneland back in October. So I think when you put it all in the blender, this is a horse. If you like a horse that's maybe sitting on a bigger race, I think First Mission might be that horse, because I think he can be tactical. He's had some adversity. He's relatively fresh. And I think with a combination of Brad Cox and whoever ends up on this horse, could be a very dangerous horse in a Pegasus.
Cox had the beaten favorite last year with Cyberknife in the Pegasus, but he's won it before in the past with horses like Knicks Go. Be sure to check out the Pegasus World Cup Wager Guide, available beginning on the 23rd. The 8th running of the Pegasus World Cup coming up on January the 27th at Gulfstream Park. $3 million on the line. Eddie Olczyk, Jeremy Plonk from First Bet to talk Contenders. Eddie, we've seen horses from the Breeders' Cup Classic. We've seen them from the Dirt Mile, but a Breeders' Cup sprint runner in the Pegasus, we've got one in Hoist the Gold.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest question mark for me is for Dallas Stewart and Hoist the Gold, Jeremy, is he a two-turn horse?
Mm-hmm.
We'll look at, I mean, if you just look at his past performances, I mean, they're all one turn except for, running in a stake at Fairgrounds back in February. So that would be, I guess that's the flare that goes off for me when I look at Hoist the Gold. So that is a big question mark. A lot of speed from this horse. There seems to be there's going to be a lot of speed in the Pegasus. Yes, there's a lot of money on the line, but this horse to me has one way to go. Now, the one positive I will say is trainer Dallas Stewart, because it seems like his horses run in the biggest races, and you think, boy, I don't know. And all of a sudden they end up hitting the board.
Right.
And, I think he is certainly a horse that you have to digest and think about. The last race, obviously, an off track was a career best. I would imagine some digression. I would assume a step back. I don't want to say a bounce, but probably a step back. But is this horse a two-turn horse? I'm going to probably wager and say no, and probably won't be on any of my tickets, even though I know Dallas Stewart has that ability to jump up and hit the board at a very long price.
The only ones praying for rain on Saturday might be the connections of Hoist the Gold off of that win in the Cigar Mile. As for the rest of us, we want sunshine and rainbows this weekend for the Pegasus World Cup. For more, be sure to download the wager guide for the Pegasus World Cup from First Bet. Our look at the contenders for the Pegasus World Cup goes next to Trademark, a horse who loves Churchill Downs. Edzo won the Commonwealth, won the Lucas Classic, won the Clark Handicap in Louisville. How will that form translate for the first time to Gulfstream Park? We'll find out on Saturday.
I'm still using some of the funds from picking Trademark in the Clark at a nice 13-1. That particular day being the favorite, First Mission. I guess I like the horse. Had a couple of rough trips prior. I thought would maybe trip out. I think the one thing that I was impressed with, comes off a tough race at Keeneland, and it comes back and runs a huge race at the Clark. I think this horse is going to take a step back, but the horse does have the ability to be tactical. But the biggest question mark I have, I mean, the horse ran the best race of his career in a huge way. And can he follow that up in the Pegasus? So that would be my biggest question mark, Jeremy. I don't know how you feel when you see horses run unbelievable, not necessarily at the longer odds, but when they run that big, are you looking for a step back at some point, even though you might have not, this might have been maybe 2 or 3 months ago for Trademark?
Yeah, the amount of time between races certainly helps, right? If you come back 3-4 weeks after a race like that, then you're really looking for the balance. But I think it's a real thing. Horses who run their best career race, if it didn't look like a natural progression, like that they're just getting better and better and better, then I think at some point you are going to see the step back. With Trademark, we will see in here, this will be a much faster pace, 48, 112 and 2, the half and 3/4 in the Clark. This race is going to go much faster than that. So it's going to be a different dynamic when they turn for home and how they have to finish up here than they did in that long stretch at Churchill Downs. So Trademark for trainer Vicky Oliver. It was a great year in 2023 for the female trainers, Linda Rice, Brittany Russell being champions in New York and Maryland. Of course, then we saw Jenna Antonucci becoming the first female to win the Triple Crown race in the Belmont Stakes with Arcangelo. So it would be apropos if Vicky Oliver takes down the Pegasus World Cup and become the first female trainer to do so here in Saturday's big one coming up on the 27th. That's a look at Trademark, one of our top contenders for this year's Pegasus World Cup. For more, be sure to check